The pre-dawn sky was still wrapped in a deep, sleepy blue when Daniel Reeves stepped out of his small farmhouse, stretching his arms as if to push the night away. His bones ached from the cold. December in the countryside always hit harder than the city ever did. Frost clung to the wooden railings of the porch, glittering under the soft glow of the barn lights he had forgotten to switch off the night before. The air smelled of pine, diesel, and the promise of hard work, three things he had grown used to over the years. Daniel was a mechanic not by chance but by inheritance. His father had been one, and so had his grandfather. Some families passed down jewelry or land. The Reeves passed down wrenches, grease-stained overalls, and an instinctive understanding of engines. At 38, Daniel had come to accept that he was built for this life, quiet, structured, predictable. He worked on cars during the day, fed his animals in the evenings, and spent his nights watching old movies with his loyal farm dog, Rusty, curled up at his feet. That morning felt like any other. He sipped from his steaming metal mug, the bitter taste of strong black coffee warming him from the inside, and made his way toward the barn. A broken tractor awaited him, a job delayed too long. Bills were piling up, and every extra hour counted. He didn't mind. Work kept his mind busy, kept him from thinking too much about the things he'd lost, and the things that had never quite come his way. But life had a strange habit of shifting in the moments one least expected. By 7 a.m., Daniel was on the road, heading toward town to pick up a part for the tractor. The two-lane highway was quiet, bordered by frostbitten fields and clusters of bare trees waving skeletal branches in the wind. The sun was just beginning to stretch over the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of gold and soft pink. It would have been a peaceful morning if not for the sudden plume of black smoke spiraling up ahead. At first, Daniel thought it was a controlled burn. Farmers often did that this time of year. But as he drew closer, he realized the smoke was thicker, darker, frantic. Flames danced above the tree line, wild and bright against the fading dawn. His chest tightened. Something wasn't right. Another quarter mile, and everything became horrifyingly clear. A minivan lay at the side of the road, smashed front first into a ditch, its hood crumpled like paper. Flames licked outward through the engine compartment, feeding hungrily on gasoline and twisted metal. The windshield had shattered, and smoke billowed through the open cracks like a beast breaking free. Daniel slammed on the brakes, gravel flying beneath his tires as his truck skidded to a stop. He jumped out before the engine fully died. Heat radiated from the burning vehicle, carrying with it the acrid smell of melting rubber and scorched fabric. A woman lay unconscious on the roadside, her forehead bloodied, breaths shallow and uneven. A man, likely her husband, was half trapped in the driver's seat, leaning sideways as though he had tried to free himself but failed. Flames crept dangerously close to his legs. Instinct kicked in. Daniel sprinted to the man first, yanking at the mangled door with every ounce of strength he had. It refused to budge. He cursed under his breath, ran to the other side, and smashed the back window with the metal bar he kept in the toolbox of his truck. Glass shattered everywhere. He climbed through, cut his arms in the process, but he didn't feel a thing. Adrenaline drowned out the pain. "Hang on," he muttered, voice hoarse. "I've got you." With a grunt and a heave, Daniel pulled the man backward through the window, dragging him far enough away from the flames that he'd no longer burned his face. The man groaned, slipping into unconsciousness, but he was alive. That's when he heard it, a faint sound that froze Daniel to the core. Crying. Weak, terrified crying. He spun around and looked back at the minivan. Through the thickening smoke inside, he saw two tiny faces in the backseat, twin girls, no older than 4 or 5. They were strapped into their car seats, their small hands reaching out, tears streaking through the soot on their cheeks. Time seemed to stop. For one paralyzing second, Daniel felt his heart seize. Flames were now creeping along the interior, devouring the seats, inching toward the back where the girls were trapped. He could hear the metal ticking loudly as the heat warped it, the kind of sound that meant the fuel tank wasn't far from giving way. "Please, no," he breathed, already moving. He shielded his face with his arm and charged back toward the burning vehicle. The heat was intense, scorching his skin even from several feet away. He ripped open the rear door. It burned his palms instantly, but he didn't let go. Smoke rushed out like a furious storm, choking him, blinding him. "Hold on, sweethearts," he shouted, coughing violently. One of the girls screamed, the other was too terrified to make a sound. Daniel unclipped the first child with trembling fingers, lifting her out quickly and handing her off to a safe spot by the ditch. Rusty barked frantically from the truck, pacing in circles, sensing the urgency. The second buckle was jammed. Of all the moments for something to malfunction, it had to be now. Daniel tugged, twisted, yanked, but the buckle refused to release. His eyes watered from the smoke. He could barely see the girl anymore. Her cries were growing weaker, fading under the roar of the flames. No, 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 come on, he growled, fighting the strap even as fire crawled up the walls of the van. Finally, with a sudden snap, the buckle gave way. He grabbed the child and pulled her tight to his chest just as a ball of fire erupted through the front of the minivan, blasting heat out through the shattered windows. Daniel stumbled backward, shielding the girl with his own body as he pushed through the smoke and ran. 10 seconds after he reached safety, the entire vehicle exploded. Shrapnel flew. Flames shot 10 feet into the air. The ground trembled. Daniel covered the girl's head with both hands as he crouched low, heart pounding so violently he thought it might burst. When the explosion settled into a raging fire, he looked around at the children, the unconscious parents, the remnants of the vehicle, and only then did reality crash over him like cold water. He had saved them. All 4 of them would have died if he hadn't driven past at that exact moment. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. Someone must have called 911. Emergency vehicles soon arrived. Firefighters, paramedics, police, and chaos replaced the stillness. The twins clung to him, their little hands gripping his shirt as if letting go would make the world fall apart again. "Sir, you need medical attention," a paramedic told him, guiding him toward an ambulance. "I'm fine," Daniel insisted, though his arms stung, his lungs burned, and his clothes smelled like smoke and fear. "Sir, you are not fine," the paramedic corrected firmly. But Daniel's eyes remained on the twins, who looked at him with a mixture of awe and confusion, as though they were trying to understand why a stranger had risked his life for them. He didn't have an answer. He had acted without thinking. Because that's what you did. You saved people. You tried. Even when it hurt. Even when it risked everything. By noon, after being bandaged, cleaned up, and questioned by authorities, Daniel finally drove home. Exhaustion pressed down on him. Like a heavy blanket, he was too tired to think, too wired to sleep. The image of the flames, the crying girls, the explosion replayed again and again in his mind. He fed his animals. He showered. He tried to rest. But when night fell, he sat on the porch with Rusty beside him, staring into the darkness. The stars were bright, scattered like diamonds on velvet. The silence was peaceful, but Daniel felt anything but peaceful. He didn't know the family he had saved. He didn't know their names or their story. Surely the news would cover the incident. Small towns loved hero stories. But Daniel didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had simply done what needed to be done. He had no idea that the next morning his life would change forever. As dawn broke, Daniel was awakened not by the crowing roosters or the mooing cows, but by a deep, thunderous rumble shaking the air. Windows rattled. The house vibrated. Rusty barked madly, scrambling to the front door. Daniel sat up, confused, heart hammering. He threw on his boots and bolted outside. And then he froze. Helicopters, dozens of them, were descending over his farmland, their powerful rotors slicing through the cold morning air. They were sleek, black, official-looking, nothing like the agricultural ones that usually flew over nearby fields. Sunlight gleamed off their bodies as they hovered close to the ground, kicking up clouds of dust and hay. His entire farm was filling with helicopters. "What in the world?" Daniel whispered, shielding his face from the wind. Before he could make sense of what was happening, the side door of the first helicopter slid open with a hydraulic hiss. A uniformed man stepped out, followed by a woman who looked strangely familiar, her eyes red from crying, holding 2 small children in her arms. The twins, and their mother. They were here, but they were not alone. Behind them, men in suits stepped out, people who did not belong in a quiet rural town, people whose presence meant something big, something beyond Daniel's imagination. The mother spotted him and burst into tears. The twins ran toward him. And the suited men looked at Daniel with the kind of seriousness reserved only for world-changing events. Daniel felt his pulse spike. What had he stepped into? And why were helicopters, military-grade helicopters, landing on his farm? Something massive was coming, and it was coming for him.